Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Erik and Derek Tiger Football Talk. We're just two Clemson grads who love nothing more than to talk a little bit more about Clemson Tiger football. And even though this might be a tougher week, it's still an instant classic. Number 1 Clemson versus number 4 Notre Dame ends in a 47-40 double overtime thriller. Erik, before we get into the game itself, I want to reference back to our predictions we made on the pregame show. Erik, you thought Clemson was going to win handedly, 42-17. What was the difference between your prediction and what we actually saw in this 47-40 double overtime thriller?
Well, look, I'm just very happy that we record this channel on the day after and not the day of, because yesterday I was fuming, I was livid, I was screaming and shouting at that TV. But also, I mean, my prediction was 42-17, and with 5 minutes left in the game, it was 33-26, and 10 of those points was given to Notre Dame by our offense with a fumble, scoop and score, and a strip, wide receiver that led to a field goal. So right there, I mean, you're talking about 33-16, which is right where I thought we would be. Look, I go back, and it's been 3 weeks now where we've struggled. And if anything, we have not fixed what we've been talking about. And I want to give Notre Dame all the props in the world. They outcoached us.
Absolutely.
Ian Book had the game of his career. Notre Dame as a whole had a game of the century, and they deserve this win. They are the number 4 team, and I think now they're the number 3 team, and they deserved it 100%. But Clemson, we didn't play Clemson football, and these coaches need to go back over the next 2 weeks. We have a bye week coming up, and we need to actually fix some stuff, and hopefully this loss really gives us the boost to do that.
Now, I want to pose a question to you, because we often talk about, whenever Clemson plays a team and we usually end up beating them. I know in Miami I saw this. The coaches afterwards for the opposing team will be like, Clemson didn't beat us, we beat ourselves. We just felt uncomfortable, all that sort of stuff. So when you look back at this game, do you feel like we beat ourselves because it was a really good Notre Dame team, or do you think we just beat ourselves because we beat ourselves in some areas?
I think it was a really good Notre Dame team. I think it was a marquee matchup, 1 versus 4 at night on the road. Yep. I think that we needed to play our best to win this game, and I think Notre Dame did play their best. I'm not going to make excuses, but we're a banged up team. We have a backup quarterback. We had 3 starters out on defense, and at the end of the game, I think we had 7 starters on defense out. I mean, we were running a skeleton crew out there that was exhausted, and Brent was trying to dial up different pressures and different looks. A lot of them didn't work. I mean, but you got to give credit to the reason our defense did not work this game was not entirely the calls, and it was not entirely our players. It was really Notre Dame's offensive line and Notre Dame's Karen Williams, who picked up the blitz, I think, on every single down.
This is where I got into a little bit of trouble. On the last episode, I specifically kind of called out Karen Williams. I said I did not think he was a first round talent. It might be a second round guy or something. Well, I was just talking about his running ability. He's got first round blocking potential. They did not have 5 linemen out there. It felt like they had 6, because he stood in there like a brick wall and picked up those blitzes all night long. So no, I definitely feel what you're saying there. And my prediction was 27-23. I thought it was going to be an ugly game with good defenses and the uncomfortable quarterbacks, because I believed in DJ, but he's still a freshman. I thought he was going to be a little bit rattled, and I did not believe in Ian Book. I've seen enough of Ian Book. I just did not think he had it in him to be that poised and honestly to be that mobile. So as the game progressed, my prediction looked like it was going to be the case, and then those offenses just kind of caught fire. So I was surprised at how well the offenses were able to move the ball. They seemed to be hot and cold. They would have momentum, and then they would lose it, and they would score in these flashes. But 4 turnovers in the game really helped out both sides of the ball. Yeah,
Ian Book had a career game. He started 10 for 10. He ended up at 22 for 39, which is not great percentage-wise, but 310 yards and a touchdown. On Clemson's side, DJ was 29 for 44 for 432 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, you can't put it on DJ. Did he miss a couple looks? Sure. Did he not? Did he take a couple sacks when he shouldn't have? Sure. But ETN was held at 28 yards. 28 yards. And Tony Elliott could not figure out a way to get ETN the ball in space. We tried to run some screens out wide, But, I mean, play calling to me on the offensive side was not good. We had the ball with 3 minutes left to win the game, and we couldn't get a first down. We couldn't even get Notre Dame to burn their timeouts. I mean, to me, that's coaching. That's not on the players. The coaches let down Clemson this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you had first down run play, and they stuffed it just like they'd done all night long. And then second down, you have the holding call, which turned into like a 5 or 10 minute debacle on whether or not Notre Dame wanted to accept it or not. And then Travis Etienne, trying to get the outside, but has to know. I mean, it's like, well, I mean, in the NFL, when Todd Gurley for the Atlanta Falcons ran into the end zone to score the touchdown, it's like, and when he wasn't supposed to, you have to know situational football. This is a veteran team, and this is not a backup player doing that. You have to get down in bounds to run that clock down. And at the end of the day, I don't believe Notre Dame even ended up using those timeouts. But Brian Kelly did talk about at the end of the game that because they had those 2 timeouts, they knew the entire playbook was wide open. They knew they could run the ball. And so you saw them to pick up, I think, 2 chunk plays running the ball. If they didn't have those timeouts, they're really not able to do that because they get stopped for a 2-yard gain. That clock is winding. So unfortunately, even though they ended the game with those 2 timeouts, it did change the play calling the rest of the game.
Yeah, and I've seen both things on defense and regarding we blitzed too much, we didn't blitz enough. To me, Ian Book, when we did not blitz and only brought 3 or 4, he had all the time in the world to throw. And I don't care if you have a whole defense full of first-round talent, DBs cannot cover wide receivers for more than 4 seconds. And Ian Book had 6, 10. I mean, he would scramble out of the pocket for 12 seconds. I mean, he had all the time in the world to make these throws. And then when he didn't, he'd just scramble. But my biggest concern with our defense was how aggressive we were not being. I mean, that first touchdown run, where you came out in a 5-2, hat on hat, props to Notre Dame, they blocked the heck out of it. Williams makes the turn, goes upfield, Nolan Turner is right there. And you know what he does? He gets flat-footed, Williams does a little juke move, Nolan Turner almost falls over, and he runs right by him. And that's what happened all night. These defenders were thinking it was 2-hand touch football out there, and they didn't know how to tackle. I mean, they were going high. They were just grabbing at shoulder pads. I don't think I saw a single one where they actually dug their toes in and launched for the hips and actually tried to make a tackle. It was a mess, and Venables needs to fix that because that's not scheming, and that's not the best player versus the backups. I mean, that's just fundamental football right there.
Yeah, I remember that play because, I mean, we were just sitting down. Hey, we got the popcorn. Hey, this is going to be a great game. We're doing introductions, and he's gotten 75 yards for a touchdown. You're like, are you kidding me? Like, this is how this game is going to start. And, like, the defense did settle in with the run game a little bit better throughout. I mean, they still had over 200 yards rushing. Nolan Turner didn't even get a hand on the guy. The thing that really ticked me off was later on when Notre Dame goes for that long field goal and it's short, and Travis Etienne's running it back. Travis Etienne gets tackled by either the kicker or the holder. I forget which one. I was like, you're telling me that in space, the kicker can tackle our first-round running back, Travis Etienne, but our safety can't even touch their guy. Like, that's what didn't make any sense to me. I was like, hey, it's situational football. That was a situation where Travis Etienne, man, if you're able to take that back to the house, you're able to give us momentum getting into the half. I mean, just make him miss, and you're trying to hurdle a guy. Like, put your foot in the ground, make him miss, juke, go around him. Yep. Just wasn't. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. Both sides had opportunities to win the game. I don't think Clemson lost this game. Notre Dame won this game. I give them all the kudos in the world because there's multiple opportunities they could have broken down like most other teams do against us. We seized momentum. We seized opportunities multiple times, and Notre Dame, to their credit, always seemed to have an answer. I spoke earlier about the Miami game. I thought Miami was going to be the team to come in, and because they were talented enough, when well coached enough, they were going to come in and beat us, and that's kind of what the ACC needs. The ACC needs parity. It wasn't Miami, but Notre Dame. Hey, stick around the ACC. I think this is great for both schools. I think this is great for the conference because more showdowns like this is what the ACC needs. This is what both teams need for their branding as well. Yeah, I mean, props to the players. I mean, both sides, Clemson and Notre Dame, they were in it to win it. And they left everything on the field. Notre Dame came out flying in that second overtime. I mean, the whole game, they were out there to win. And, I mean, huge props to both teams. And I'm going to stop harping on it after this.
But second overtime, Tony Elliott, play calling wise.
Yeah.
First overtime, first play, drop back pass, standard shotgun, hits a wide open post route, or not a wide, it was a great throw by DJ, touchdown.
Great throw.
We come out in the second overtime, and we run a fake screen to the deep shot, which takes forever to set up, and you know the defense is coming for him. So we get sacked from the blind side. I mean, Carmen missed the block completely. And then the second play right after that, you ran another play-action play after you just saw your quarterback get sacked because of how much they were flying to get the sack, and we ran another play-action play. It was just play calling to me. It needs to be fixed. And I watched the post-game interview with Tony Elliott, and to me, he didn't seem like he took any of the blame. I mean, he was praising the players and all that stuff. But Tony Elliott, I mean, Dabo needs to stop being so loyal, and he needs to start putting some pressure on his coaches to fix some of these mistakes.
Yeah, because I remember they asked Dabo Swinney after the game, like, did you think you were going to have more running success against Notre Dame? And he said, yeah, absolutely. And I think you ask a lot of Clemson fans, like, I don't know how many yards I expected in this game, but we've been having less and less success running the ball. I want to read this out real fast. Against Miami, we had 258 yards rushing. Next week, Georgia Tech, 171. Against Syracuse next week, 147. Against Boston College, 106. You just see this trend going down. Obviously, against Notre Dame, we have 34 yards rushing. So I really hope they did not come into this game expecting to be able to run the ball, because we lost the battle of the line of scrimmage on both sides. So it was not even close. I really can't remember a game, maybe against Alabama when we won the first national championship, where we were just getting whooped up front. But we've always had the defensive line to be able to get pressure for the last, I mean, it really feels like decade, but we'll say at least the last 5 years. But it was a significant mismatch, and I get trying to scheme around it. I think the coaches could have put us in a little bit better position at the end of the day. Like, they had a mismatch where they were owning both lines of scrimmage, and some of that was due to injuries. Some of that was just due to them having just the better players.
Yeah, and I mean, you go back to the old saying of defense wins championships and running the ball wins championships. And right now for Clemson, those are the two things that we do not have going for us.
Nope.
I mean, we've got a bye week. We've got 2 weeks off. We are a completely beaten up team. I think we've got 10 or 12 people down with injuries. So I'm hoping 2 weeks off lets these guys rest up. I didn't see, Brisset went out late with a knee injury. I'm hoping it's just a bruised knee. I didn't see any sort of reports coming out that he tore anything or that he was going to be out for any amount of time. It looked like he just took a shot to that knee, but Landon's out. I mean, Skalski had surgery, and I haven't heard a timeline on him coming back. Jones is still dealing with the hamstring injury. Tyler Davis is still dealing with the ankle injury. Turner went out with what looked like maybe a concussion late in the game. I mean, we're banged up. Booth went out late in the game.
Booth. I don't know what happened to Booth.
I don't know what happened to Booth either.
Yeah.
He was gone. I mean, he was out. Nagata's still dealing with his core injury, and he did not look 100%. And it looked like he re-aggravated it. So when you re-aggravate an injury, it's going to prolong for a long time. Frank Ladson, I don't think he even took a snap. So the list goes on and on and on, and I'm hoping that 2 weeks off and then a Florida State game, we need to get these players healthy and back to the field if we have any shot of making a run at the ACC championship game.
Yeah, I joked in one of the previous episodes that Clemson's B team could beat South Carolina and beat a lot of other teams. It seems like our B plus team went toe to toe with Notre Dame. This is not a disrespect to Notre Dame. Like, let's just talk facts for a second. Like, we came into the game missing a handful of very important players. The quarterback of our defense is James Skalski. He was out. Trevor Lawrence is out. I'm not going to run through the list again. And then midway through the game, we are losing players. And so by the time you get to the overtime, and I think Brian Kelly knew that. At the end of the game, he was asked why he didn't go for two when they scored that late touchdown. I thought he was going to. And he made up some sort of answer about, no, we just didn't want to beat ourselves. We wanted to force them to beat it. I think because he's looking at, their defense is out. Like, we feel like we can score them all night long. Why would we go for two and just risk, one play? Why bother gambling when he probably felt pretty confident at that point in time? And that was before Brazil even went down. So I will ask the question, just because we were talking about it so much in the last video. If Notre Dame wins, it's a lose-lose situation because they win, but Trevor Lawrence is there. Thankfully, I think that narrative is gone. But do you think if Trevor Lawrence is in this game, do you think anything changes in this outcome?
Maybe. I mean, there were a couple shots that DJ missed. I mean, he missed a wide open EJ Williams. EJ Williams over the center when they did the bootleg to the right. Maybe Trevor sees that. It definitely looked like on the sidelines, Trevor was talking to DJ a lot about things that he was seeing versus what DJ was seeing. I think DJ is not a runner. He's a pocket passer, and that's what he came in as. And I don't care that he's 6'6", 250. I mean, he's an athlete, but he's not agile, and he is not a downfield sprinter runner. So on a lot of these designed run plays or read options where he kept it, I mean, he didn't get, I think he had like 12 yards on the ground or something like that. So I do think having Trevor in there, it might, we might have had that part of our game because Trevor is a runner. Again, I'm going to harp on it one more time because really let down by the coaches. 16 seconds left in the game, 2 timeouts, I think, and we kneel the ball, knowing that we're completely beaten down. Like, I don't know what the coaches were thinking that we could win this game in overtime with how beaten down we were. I mean, you got DJ back there that had over 400 yards passing, 16 seconds and 2 touchdowns, and you need to go 40 yards. And they were, when they came out, they were in a deep prevent defense, and we saw it. What was it, Florida versus Georgia? And Florida hit that nice under route because Georgia played this prevent and they got that field goal in right before half. I don't know why we don't air that ball out. I mean, I don't see. Sure, is there a risk of fumbling? Is there a risk of interceptions? But with 16 seconds left, I mean, let's run a play at least. Let's not just kneel the ball down.
DJ can chuck that ball probably further than anybody else in college football, even at 18, 19 years old as a freshman. I don't know if in the back of his mind, I know at the end of the half against Miami, he goes for a kick and it gets blocked and turns back. I don't know if he was just trying to play it safe for that reason. But looking back at 16 seconds, BT Potter can kick the ball. Like, we have a good kicker who can launch it. He can probably hit a 60-yard field goal if all the conditions were right. There was probably an opportunity where it's like, I don't know. Maybe, I don't think, if you were to ask him, I don't think he would say he would want to go back and change it, but you have to look at the lay of the land, see your team is a little bit mismatched in this situation. And not only that, because they just scored, now they have all of the momentum in the world. One thing about DJ, he threw for over 400 yards. He now, joins a very elite company in Clemson history to throw for over 400 yards. Joins Deshaun Watson and Taj Boyd and Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence only has 1 game, and DJ's already tied him as a freshman. So I don't think anyone's going to see or complain about DJ. He had a great game. I don't know how you have a pedestrian 440 yards, but somehow managed to do it. He looked great the entire game. Trevor Lawrence, the thing with Ian Book that was so frustrating is he all of a sudden was this mobile guy. I kind of undervalued his athleticism, or maybe I'm overvaluing our linebackers' athleticism. I really can't tell, but there's just too many times he would come up and juke around our linebacker and get the first down, and I think that was the main difference. And if you look at the third down percentages, they were above 50%, and I would say at least half of those were because of Ian Book and his scrambling potential, and we didn't have that on our side of the ball. Maybe Trevor Lawrence would have helped us in that, but I think this was a perfect way for Notre Dame to win the game. DJ goes off, he has a great time. It's not necessarily the quarterback that loses it, so it's a great narrative for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, all props to Notre Dame. Again, we'll keep echoing that because Notre Dame won this game. Me harping on our coaches and our players and the things that we did wrong does not take away from Notre Dame winning this game because they came out and won it. You talk about Ian Book scrambling. Super athletic. He's making a ton of plays with his legs. But again, we had Jake Venables shadowing him on many of those scrambles, and Jake Venables was just in the wrong spot. He just and then when he was at least close, he didn't make the tackle. We had so many missed tackles. But again, kind of going back to, we got 2 weeks off. We've got a lot of tape now over the last 3 weeks that we can sit down, digest, go over, and then hopefully, I'm not saying that we should get rid of these coaches. I do think that we have one of the best coaching squads in the nation, but hopefully they can go to work and pick apart these videos and break it down with his players and find a way to fix these mistakes because we're going to need to if we're going to compete moving forward and compete in the ACC championship, which is likely going to be against Notre Dame. And if we win that, the playoffs are going to be hard if we're not playing at the top caliber that we need to be.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask you a question about like where Notre Dame stands, because it's impossible to say is Clemson one of the best teams in the country, because we're just simply missing too many people. By the time we take the field 2 weeks against Florida State, honestly, we don't know from a roster standpoint how many of these guys we're going to have back. But do you think, is Notre Dame one of the best teams in the country? Are they alongside Ohio State or in Alabama? Or are they the next tier below with the Florida and the Texas A&Ms? Or do you think they belong with Alabama and Ohio State?
I think that Alabama and Ohio State are right now in a league of their own. Earlier in the season, I think Clemson was in that league when we were playing the most complete offensively and defensively. Obviously, we've fallen short of that in the past 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. I think Notre Dame is probably the next tier down, but probably at the top of that next tier. I think they're above Florida. I've got them above Texas A&M. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a really good second half or a few more games of this season for the ACC and the SEC, because potentially if we win out and Notre Dame wins out and we meet each other in the ACC championship game and it's another close one and Clemson comes out on top, we potentially could have two ACC teams fighting for those top 4 spots. And you got Florida and Texas A&M and Alabama and Ohio State. Ohio State looks like a true lock. I don't think anybody in that conference is doing anything other than them. But you're going to have probably potentially 6 teams fighting for 4 spots, with 2 of them being locks with Alabama and Ohio State.
Exactly, and not to move on from the Notre Dame game, but I think Clemson fans are kind of waking up this morning asking themselves, do we still have a chance at the ACC championship? Do we still have a chance at a national championship? And really where we stand as a whole. So that is the topic I kind of want to move on to, like you just mentioned. These are the ACC standings. Notre Dame is now the lone undefeated team. Below that you have Clemson, but Miami is also there as well, with the only loss against Clemson. Clemson still has to play a couple of teams, Florida State, and then they play Virginia Tech as well. Notre Dame still has to play a UNC team, which may have been underachieving so far this year, but is a talented team. I don't think Coach Mack is anything less than excellent. So there's some challenges remaining, but if Notre Dame does run the table, and so does Clemson, they meet up, Clemson avenges it, but Florida also runs the table and beats Alabama in the championship game for the SEC, you're going to have some questions where Ohio State's probably going to make it in, just because I think the Big Ten's in shambles right now between Penn State and everything else that's going on. But that's where it's going to be coming down to. Is it the SEC, the ACC that's maybe able to get 2 teams in?
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm kind of looking forward. Notre Dame plays Boston College next week. I think that's going to be an amazing matchup. I'm curious to see how Notre Dame responds to that. Sometimes it's hard for teams after winning a marquee matchup, in double overtime, to then get back to work the next day or on Monday and kind of show up ready for that next game. I think Boston College is an elite team that has a great offense. Mm-hmm. And Phil Dracovic probably wants to put one over on Notre Dame for not naming him as the starting quarterback. But, obviously Ian Book showed why he was named it this weekend. And then, obviously, we're going to have to run the tables. And like you said, you brought up Florida, Alabama. That's probably going to be the SEC championship game. You're potentially looking at a bunch of one-loss teams here as this season moves forward. And then obviously with injuries and COVID that's still happening, nothing is set in stone at this point.
No, and we're not really talking about the Pac-12 as a whole. It's too young in the season. They've had, some of them have only had 1 game underneath their belt, or all of them, I guess, have. Some don't even have 1 game, because I think 2 games got canceled. So we're just going to omit them for the time being. And Big 12 are nowhere close. I think Oklahoma State lost this weekend, which was their only chance anyway. Now, an interesting team I do want to talk about is the Cincinnati Bearcats. Their defense is playing really well. I think they're ranked number 5. I'm curious, if it comes down to end of the year, are they able to jump over a 1-loss ACC or SEC team? What are your thoughts on that?
This is a hard one, because especially this year in particular, I feel like outside the Power 5, you do have a couple of these teams that are playing at a very high level. And it's always hard to judge them, because they're playing against other teams that are in their conferences that, again, aren't top 25 talent. So it's always kind of hard to see where you think that they stack up nationally. I kind of want, I'm not in the position where I really want the playoff to be expanded. I think that adds more games and more complexities, and more than I think that the players need to go through, physically to play through all those games. It really come down to the top 6 right now, ACC, SEC, and the Big Ten, seeing how their season finishes to see if a Cincinnati or an SMU can kind of sneak in to that 4 spot. It's just tough when you're playing outside the Power 5 conferences.
It is. I mean, and the margins, the later you get in the season, they become razor thin. Florida cannot suffer another loss and still be thinking about college football championship ideas. A&M is another team that is creeping up in the rankings. They lost to Alabama bad a few weeks ago, but they've played well and they dismantled our rival down in South Carolina. I think it was like 48-3 or something along those lines. So that's another team where they're not, most likely they're not going to, actually, unless Alabama drops 2 games, they're not going to get a chance to play in the SEC championship game. So they may be sitting there as a one-loss top 8, top 5 team. Are they able to get in over at Cincinnati or something along those lines? It's fun to ponder at this point in time. Usually it works its way out, and it's clear cut what the top 4 teams are going to be. But I think that the way that this is shaping up, now that you have a contender like Clemson that's already got 1 loss, that's maybe now on the outside looking in, although we'll probably still be in the top 4, it's going to be a little chaotic. I think that 4th spot is going to belong to Clemson for the time being, but if Florida goes in and beats Alabama, who might be considered the number 1 team in the country, it's going to be a little bit of chaos here. We don't really have a ton of games left. If you're looking at these schedules, for the ACC, you might have 3 or 4 games left. We're really coming down to the wire at this point.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting kind of when the playoff committee first releases their rankings, which is in a few weeks. I'm curious to see how they see it versus how the analysts and the AP and the coaches poll see it. I'm also curious how they view this loss for Clemson, because as much as we still have 5-star talent and we still came in and played and put up a good fight, we are banged up. I mean, there is an asterisk on this game, unfortunately for Notre Dame, not taking anything away from them. They won this game. They beat the number 1 team. But there is an asterisk. I mean, there is the fact that we were playing without so many people. And that's part of football. But I'm curious to see how the playoff committee sees this and views this loss for us. Is it truly a big loss, or is it truly just they played as well as they could have with the players they had. It's not the Clemson team that's going into the ACC championship or into the playoffs if everyone gets healthy.
Right, it gives Clemson a narrative and a route to come back in without really taking away too much credit from Notre Dame. This is the biggest win Notre Dame's had in about 20 years. I mean, the biggest game they've had since the Reggie Bush game when USC came in. And this is a game that Notre Dame usually finds a way to lose, not to win. So it shows a big step in the maturity of that program going forward. You mentioned earlier that they'll be playing Boston College next week. That's a sound team, a competitive team, and now Notre Dame, instead of gunning for somebody, they're going to be the one that's gunned on. So it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that. If they fall flat, do they look impressive on the next win and take the next step forward? But these next few weeks are going to be very interesting to see how it comes down and how it plays. And like you mentioned, when the College Football Committee comes out and puts their rankings, they say it changes from week to week, but whoever gets that 4th spot, it will be very, very interesting at that point in time.
Yep. And elsewhere around the league this weekend, I mean, Georgia went down to Florida. Georgia still hasn't figured out their quarterback play. They subbed out Stenson halfway through. I think he was kind of banged up. He took a stinger to his shoulder on his throwing side. Cincinnati rolled again. Texas A&M rolled again. Alabama had a bye, so they got a nice free pass to be the number 1 team next week. But it was a pretty good weekend for football. I don't know what's going on with Michigan. I'm curious to see how much longer Jim Harbaugh can hang on to his job. I've heard some rumors that he might flee back to the NFL before he gets fired. I feel bad for all the Michigan fans out there, because when Jim was hired, they really thought that he was going to be the saving grace to this team and turn the program around, and he's now 0-11 against top 11 teams. So
the expectations though for Michigan were what? I mean, that they were going to beat Ohio. Like, Ohio State's been the cream of the crop for the last 5 years, and maybe they don't have a national championship since 2015, but they're one of the best teams in college football. And Michigan just really hasn't been there. They're a top 20 team normally, and this year they're still trying to figure out a ton of stuff. It's again the Big Ten. It's Ohio State, and I think everybody else. Indiana, I don't know if we can say that they're legit or not. I know they've beaten some teams, but they beat Penn State. Penn State doesn't look good. Beating Michigan. Michigan doesn't really look that good. So because the Big Ten is in the same situation the ACC and the SEC were a few weeks ago, where it's hard to evaluate any of these wins at this point in time. So hopefully in a few more weeks we'll have a little more clarity. But again, that's why this game was so important, because Georgia, Florida, that didn't live up to the building. You had terrible quarterback play from Georgia, and Georgia has a great defense that tried to keep them in it, but you just can't do that for the entire length of 4 quarters. All the other marquee matchups, some of them were good, but this was a great game. This was an instant classic. This is, I saw, I think 11 million viewers, logged in. That's a huge rating for the ACC to have, for Notre Dame and Clemson to have. I'm glad it lived up to the billing. I'm glad Notre Dame won the game, not Clemson losing it. I wish we would have been on the other side of it, but at the end of the game, I think we still passed through the College Football Playoff Championship, and at the end of the day, that's what really matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey guys, if you like our content, help us out, subscribe. We're doing this every week. We're on a bye next week, but be looking for a video probably on Sunday of next week. We'll kind of go over all the games that happened in the league, ACC, SEC, Big Ten, Pac-12, and we'll update you on how Clemson's doing in their bye week injury-wise, and we'll start getting ready for Florida State in 2 weeks.
There we go. Have a good week, everyone.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers.